Hey everybody, Matt Barton here with this week's Broker Minute or Two. Today we're going to be talking about buyer agency issues. Got a lot of questions over the last little while about predominantly two things. What should we be looking out for when we deal with unrepresented buyers, and how do we structure the contracts correctly, and what to look out for? And the second one is the one I get the most of, which is, hey, I wrote my buyer agency agreement for a lower percentage and now the seller's willing to pay more. Can I just tweak that? So I'm going to tackle those two issues. Let's start off with the REPC. So we all know clearly in the REPC, Section 5 has the section, as you can see here, let me zoom in, is the confirmation of agency. So let's tackle the first question. What happens if there's an unrepresented buyer? Let's say in our scenario, clearly we have a listing, we are the seller's agent, and the buyer is coming with an offer. How should Section 5 be filled out? Well, easiest way is obviously put your information, the brokerage information, in the seller's portion, and the buyer's agent put a N/A, non-applicable, because they're not going to have agency. Or you could say no agent, no brokerage, but NA is completely adequate. Now, let's bounce to the ERS, right? Because there's a connection here. In the ERS, let me clean this up so it's easier to view. Zoom in a little bit. This is the ERS. This is Section 2, where our compensation, or now I guess I should say compensations, are covered. Now, the one we're all very familiar with is Section 2.1. This is what we get paid as a brokerage and as a listing agent if and when the property sells. That part is super easy, straightforward. In December, they added this section because there was a lot of situations where buyers were coming now because of the national settlement saying, hey, we want to save money and we don't want to have a buyer's agent. So what they don't say, but is the reality, is we know you have a listing agent and they'll provide all the information we need and the forms, and we'll have our appraiser and our inspector and everybody else go through the listing agent, which means we're doing more work. We're doing what would have normally fallen on the shoulders of a buyer's agent. And so, UAR said, well, not that you have to put something in here, although I personally would highly recommend you do, because it's not even a fee unless it is a fee, if that makes sense, right? If there's no unrepresented buyer, then Section 2.2 is moot. But if there is an unrepresented buyer, I don't know about you, done this a lot of years, tend to do a lot of work on behalf of the buyers, so I would highly suggest you do put something in there. What it is, I'm not going to tell you. We don't have a company policy that says, oh, you've got to put 3% or 2% or 1%. Personal opinion, not company policy. I would not add that additional work and the inherent risk that potentially comes with it, even though they're an unrepresented buyer. I wouldn't do that for less than an additional 1%. So if in Section 2.1 for your listing services, the company's listing services, you had 3%, I would definitely put at least 1% into Section 2.2. Again, not company policy, just my recommendation, and that would be the bare minimum. All right. So then this one, I'm just going to touch on this because we've talked about this a lot in the past, but people still get this confused, right? There's really two parts to Section 2.3. The first one is just in the title, our authority as a listing agent and a listing brokerage to even talk about the possibility of a cooperative compensation being paid. If you do not have, notice the first line here, right? The company is authorized to advertise or otherwise communicate. That means discussions, text, MLS, that the seller and or the company is offering to pay compensation to a buyer's brokerage in the amount. Now remember, this is where a lot of people get confused. The whole point of the national settlement was it couldn't be fixed until the offer actually came across. And that's why up to an amount up to. There's no guarantee here. It says it could go as high as this, but we're not guaranteeing it will go. It could be anywhere from 0 up to whatever amount is declared here. That gives us as the brokerage, listing brokerage, and listing agent to talk about that when almost every buyer agent says, what is the compensation on this, right? If we have 0 in there, or some undefined term like, I don't know, negotiable, which I personally hate, and we call it out when it comes through at the office managers, that is not a known term in the contract. And anytime you don't have a known term that is vague, ambiguous, that translates to the potential of getting into an argument and litigation. So I would highly suggest that you put something in here that allows you to talk about compensation and stay within the parameters of what is specified in here. The way to explain this to sellers, if I was to simplify this, is be like, hey, in years past, we actually had pre-established compensation to where if you, as a seller, signed a purchase agreement, you were obligated through the listing agreement and through the MLS to pay a certain amount. The national settlement did away with that. They wanted there to be some flexibility. The problem or the challenge that has come up because of that wonderful change of events for sellers is that we now have to have authority to even talk about what could be, and that's what Section 2.3 is about. Now I wish I could stop the conversation there, because that's really the most important thing given the way this has played out over the last year. The second half of the paragraph talks about whether the company, meaning RE/MAX Associates, could enter into an agreement with another brokerage that if we accept an offer, that the broker and the seller, because of Section 2.3, would then be obligated to pay the compensation based on an accepted offer. The reality is this: 95, 98% of the time, the cooperative compensation to a buyer's brokerage is being handled in Section 4.3E, right? Oh, well, I don't want to do that, of the REPC. That's where almost everybody is handling it. And so it really makes the ERS second half of the paragraph of Section 2.3 kind of moot, but it still may cause some consternation. You know what? The easiest way is to perhaps do a simple addendum to the ERS that says, we will not enter into a broker-to-broker compensation agreement without the seller's authorization. If that's added to this, it's pretty ironclad. Okay, now let's go to the hotter issue, and I'm running long on time. The buyer-broker agreement. This is the current buyer-broker agreement, and Section 2 is the key here, and I want to just quickly go through a couple things here. Of course, we specify a dollar amount and a percentage that accommodates our $295 and whatever percentage. And that all is known as, notice right here, it says the brokerage fee. So if you're going to change that, please don't call it buyer's agent commission, don't call it commission. The technical term in the agreement is brokerage fee, so we should stay consistent with it. That's point number one. Point number two, this is where agents, they can put in here, I don't know, 2%. And lo and behold, the builder's offering 3%. And you go under contract and you come back to your office manager and say, oh yeah, but they're paying more. Well, the starting point is, well, we can't pay. We as the company, right, they pay the company. So the company is in the liability seat first and foremost. And the national settlement says we as a company cannot be paid more than is in our agency agreement. So the first thing we do is go back and look at the agreement and says, oh, unfortunately, you put 2%. So we're just going to have to instruct the builder that we can't accept that additional percent. You can't imagine oh my gosh, you guys are such sticklers, blah, blah, blah. Why are you making my life so difficult, even though you trained on us over and over about this? And now that it's happening, I want you to just wave your magic wand and make it right. Now, I'm being a little melodramatic to demonstrate the point. But here's why. This line right here, the company may not accept total compensation from any source than is greater than the brokerage fee, which was just defined up here. This is like ironclad contract language, okay? Now, the next question I get is, well, wait a minute. Can't I just do an addendum to the buyer agency agreement and then get that additional 1%? And I'm just here to tell you that that answer is no, and I'll explain to you why and a little bit of a carve out. So, in the national settlement, the governing portion of the national settlement was the compensation that's being paid to a brokerage and therefore an agent must be fixed, objective compensation, right? It must be fixed, objective compensation. What does that mean? I don't have enough time to go through all of that. But what I can tell you is that when these questions have been asked on legal forums and with the DOJ, the question has come up, can you use an addendum? Here's the answer. Yes, but only if it is truly prospective change and not retrospective change. Translated, if you happen to be aware before you start showing somebody a property that your buyer broker's at 2%, and because you've done business with a builder or somebody else, or you talked to the other agent, and they said, yeah, on an approved offer, we're willing to pay up to 3%. Can you do an addendum at that point? The answer is yes, because it is a prospective change, not a retrospective change. If you went under contract and then went and modified your buyer broker agreement, that will not be accepted by the company. We will take the default because that does create legal exposure for us. The DOJ's focus in the settlement was on upfront transparency and preventing post-contract, Rep-C, adjustments that could be seen as steering or undisclosed increases in agent pay. That is, that's like kind of the mic drop legally. That is why the company cannot accept an addendum increasing the buyer agency fee after something has been under contract, and by their definition, even before you start showing. So please don't give us a hard time on this. This isn't us trying to make your life difficult. It's trying to keep our company that we all work so hard for to be successful, to keep it out of harm's way in litigation. So I hope that helps. I know that was a lot of ground to cover, and I'm sorry this went a little long, but this is a really important topic. Hope it was helpful for you. As always, if you have any specific individual questions, give me a call. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll talk soon.